Alright, in this video I wanted to cover a pretty sticky issue, and that is the rights and obligations of parents and children. I think this is something that needs to be looked at because when we have political discourse, there's this big distinction where people say, well, you should be free to choose, but then obviously not children, and it's just where do you draw the line and all that, and who are children property of their parents, and are parents obligated to take care of their children, and if so, to what extent? And I want to say right off the bat, there is no definite answer that's not completely arbitrary. So I don't want to. Well, I guess let me explain it. When I look at the issue, I think it's very easy for children. Children did not choose to be born. They had no say in the matter. And so children have no obligation to their parents, at least simply because they're children of the parents. Now, when somebody, people say, well, but the parents give you all these resources, all this food, all these gifts. That's all true. But the fact that somebody gives you something unconditionally, or even if they give it to you and if you're not in a position to refuse or even know to refuse, then you're not really getting any obligations out of that. If somebody just comes and gives you a present, and doesn't say, well, they just give you a present, they can't just come back later and say, well, you're obligated to me now. Now, if they came up and said, I'm going to give you this, and in return you owe me something else, if you accept, then yes, you've implicitly, at least, perhaps even explicitly agreed to it. Now, what this means is that, in my view, children have the right to disassociate from their parents at any point that they choose. If they assert that they want to leave their parents, then that assertion has to be taken seriously and respected. And we have to err on the side of the individual here. We can't say, well, he's only 8 or whatever. Drawing the line is completely arbitrary. It seems unlikely, at some point children can't speak, so it seems unlikely if they even wanted to leave, we wouldn't even know. The fact that they have been given all this material support, perhaps even emotional support, in no way indebts them to their parents. It's just they're not in a position to refuse what they've been given. They didn't ask for it, usually. Now, that's not to say that your parents then are your slave. I mean, there's a point where there is conditional. So if your parents say, okay, we will give you a car, and on the condition that you do the following things, if the child agrees to that, then the child is obligated. They've made an implicit or explicit agreement. But just to receive things by virtue of being a child of parents or a parent or whatever, now that does not count. That is not a contract. That is not binding. Now with parents, it's a little bit more tricky. I would argue that parents are obligated to their children, but only to the extent that they believe parents are obligated to children. I know it sounds like double, like a circular definition there, but let me explain. For one thing, let's say that two people decide to get married, and they say, we want to get married, and we're getting married because we want to grow old together, and we want to raise a family, i.e. have children. And so they do this. Now, I would say that the children that come from that arrangement, the children had no say in it, but the two adults did, and so they are in effect entering into agreement with each other And by bringing these other people into existence, that agreement, they're bound by that agreement in them. So it would be like if I open a business and I say, well, I'm going to provide a service for whoever walks in that door, and I'm like I've made an agreement to do that, with my shareholders. Then when customers walk in the door, then I'm kind of, obligated to do that. So the trick here, though, is that there is no absolute then, because what people have in mind for what they believe parenting entails differs. All right, some parents think that they owe their children whatever their children need forever. Other parents think that they owe their children whatever their children need for a certain number of years. Other parents, could be different. Now, this makes it hard to prove, because unless they explicitly write it down, which they almost never do, even in a marriage contract, even when one's drawn up with a prenup and everything, I've never heard of them explicitly saying what the obligations they think they have as parents to their children. However, the fact that they are bringing children into existence, I think, implies that they do believe that they have obligations. Now, when it comes to law only, this is a whole other video, but law only comes about when there are disputes, and disputes need to be settled in arbitration. So I think what should happen is that when disputes arise between parents and children over the obligations of parents to the children, since I don't believe that there are obligations of children to parents, that those disputes should be arbitrated by third parties, objective third parties, to whatever degree that's possible, and that the mindset of the parents, at least at the point of conception, is a valid claim. So if now it could be very difficult to prove what that is, but that would be the basis. Now, then there's the question of what about parents who didn't want to get married, who didn't want to have kids. I would say that their concept of what it takes to raise a child is still the basis of their obligations. And I would say this is relatively akin to driving a car and getting in a car accident and causing an injury. When you get in a car, it is never your intention to cause bodily harm to somebody else, or at least usually. But you understand that that's possible. You understand that if you get in your car, you may run over somebody and paralyze them. And that means that you are liable to that person. You can't injure somebody even accidentally with your car and then say, that wasn't my intention, I have no obligation. Likewise, if you're not married, if you're just dating somebody, and even if you say, well, I don't want to have kids, I tried to use contraception and it just failed, conception occurred, birth occurred, I didn't want it to happen, I'm not obligated. Well, it's true you didn't want it to happen, but you ran that risk. And in that case, I think that the child, or somebody, an advocate on the child's behalf, would have a right to say, okay, what did this person believe the obligations of parents to children were at the time of conception, and whatever that is established to be, that is what they owe. And I understand how extremely difficult it is to establish this, but honestly, there is no easy. Any cure-all answer would be completely arbitrary. Just to say they owe so many dollars per year or so many years, that's way too. I mean, it violates, like market principles. It violates spontaneous order. The law in this area needs to be developed through arbitration. All right, it cannot be developed through me and you and somebody else just thinking about it really hard and just picking. There has to be a body of law, aka there have to be many trials with adjudicators, with advocates for both sides arguing this out many times, and eventually a body of law will develop. And there will be certain conventions, and those conventions will probably be, how do you determine what the parent thought their obligations would be were they to sire a child? And actually it is likely that such a body of law would actually make it if it was such a big problem, you'd probably see a lot more explicit use in it. Where couples would start saying, this is what we think that we're obligated to do. I know it's not an easy, it's not a nice, easy answer, but honestly, to think that there would be an easy, clear-cut answer, I think, is unreasonable in this situation. So, for kids, like I said, this doesn't mean parents are slaves to their children. If you can establish that a parent only believed they were obligated to provide a certain amount of material support to a child, beyond that, the child doesn't really have a claim. And if parents want to kick out their kids or whatever, that's, beyond that point, they have every right to do that. I don't know. This is one of those really contentious issues, but I think that part of the reason it's contentious is because people attempt to come to absolute answers when there really aren't any. I mean, if we think about it, we could get on here and debate, trying to decide, the age limit and all that. That would be like us arguing what the price of bread should be. And obviously that's silly. We shouldn't argue about what the price of bread should fluctuate. It should be based on the supply and the demand and the values of producers and of consumers and the arbitrage of the market. And for someone to just say, well, the price of bread should be this, is extremely arrogant and conceited, and it doesn't work in the real world. And attempting to implement such a standard would be counterproductive in the long run. And I think that we have to apply that same reasoning to law generally, but to the parent-child relationship specifically. But those are just my ideas on it. I'm more than prepared to hear other opinions. So, all right, that's it for now.